The Gibraltar family was part of the very first expeditions that came to the Outlands over 400 years ago, and thousands of others took travel across the unexplored frontier from the core systems to reach our home here on Solace. Wow, I've been to that town. It's where I grew up, brother. My family never left, which is why it's so nice. But of course, some colonies grew just a little bit too big to handle. Kinda like me. Working together became more of a challenge, but that didn't stop the Gibraltars from doing their part to help those in need. You see, we always looked out for others. That never stopped. It was the Gibraltars who created Saras. Who is Saras? Not a who, my metal brother. The Search and Rescue Association of Solace was created by my family about 200 years ago. There was supposed to be support from other IMC expeditions, but they never came. So our people took it upon themselves to build their own lives. They didn't do too bad of a job either, considering the lack of resources and differences of opinions. It wasn't harmony, but it was what was needed at the time to keep things moving forward and to survive. Saras was open to all volunteers and took donations from whoever they could. I think I've got some old stuff from that time. Gibraltars tend to keep things longer than they should. Saras sounded like a fun group of friends. I think it was when it first started, but from what I was told, things changed a bit when the IMC came back around the mid-2600s to reclaim what they believed belonged to them. The Outlands had become home to generations of us early settlers, so someone's laying claim to what we built. Well, let's just say it didn't go over so well at first. Some battles were fought, but in the end, the IMC promised safety, security, resources, and practically everything we needed to expand our home and prolong our survival. Agreements were made within a day. IMC outposts, factories, and facilities began popping up all over the place, and there wasn't a building, market, or street corner without IMC security watching over you. Even the outer territories saw their share of IMC presence, despite their opposition. I know some people felt safer, like it was a good choice and made for better living. They even created the Thunderdome blood sport at Kings Canyon, which brought some jobs to Solace. But there were still many who knew the IMC was up to no good. They were right not to trust them, because when the frontier wars came to an end, we were all abandoned. Oh no, what did you do? Solace was one of the last places the IMC left, so in some ways we were luckier than others. When the Civil War broke out, many people on Solace refused to get involved, even the Gibraltars. We were selfish and stayed to protect our own instead, and I didn't agree with it at all. It got dangerous out there, Path. Dozens of territories killing each other over power. And there I was arguing with my parents, being told not to help for the first time in my life. I had friends who fought and friends who died in that war. I know our poor buddy Elliot lost his brothers, and I'm sure there are a few other legends who could probably tell you a bit more about that war. But not me. So to answer your question about what I did, I ran away. I made my way to Solace City and picked up a job working at the Thunderdome. There weren't many places a 14-year-old boy like myself could get a job. But the Thunderdome was on its last legs and took on whoever walked through the door. I think it closed down for good a few years later, around 2719, when the IMC left Solace. I survived on my own for a few months, which wasn't easy. I sent letters to my parents just so they'd know I was fine, but not to come looking for me. It was a lonely time in my life, but that's where I met someone very important to me. His name was Nick Gentile. Nick and I worked at the Thunderdome. We cleaned the seats after the games, stocked the markets with food and drink. It was a part-time gig, but at least we got to watch some of the fighters. I learned some of my moves from them, you know? I always wanted to jump down and fight, but Nick held me back, which was probably good, because I would have been quickly destroyed. I guess I figured if I couldn't fight in the war, then maybe the games would scratch that itch. But when the games shut down, me and Nick found ourselves out of a job and with barely a coin to our name. One night, we got to chatting about the war. I told him the story of Little Mouse, about how I wanted to join the fight because that's what a real Gibraltar would do. And that's when I told him my plan. I convinced him that we should run away together, join the fight, and do whatever it took to protect our friends together. I could have just gone by myself, but maybe I didn't want to go alone. Or maybe I didn't want to leave Nick. I think Nick knew that. Or maybe I pressured him into thinking that. Either way, we were both in. It was the middle of the night and I snuck back into my parents' home. I had packed up a duffel bag with everything I thought I need and left a note before stealing my father's old motorbike to go pick up Nick. I remember it was starting to rain that night and I began to have second thoughts. But I knew when Nick snuck out of his window that this was the right thing to do. We had booked charter to Gaia right outside of Solace City, not too far from Little Mouse. But I remember being in a rush. Nick always took a little longer to get ready than I did, so I decided to take a shortcut through the Cascade Mountains. Big mistake, brother. Big mistake. I remember the skies ran from this beautiful bright purple to being covered by a blanket of dark green clouds as far as the eyes could see in only seconds. And in that same amount of time, a blink of an eye, I lost control of the bike. I almost hit an oncoming vehicle but dodged it, only to crash through the guardrail and skid off the side of the cliff. When the dust settled, Nick was completely knocked out. The bike had crashed at the bottom of the cliff, but we somehow managed to get caught on a rocky ledge just before the final drop. When I tried to move him, I noticed his leg was completely broken, was barely hanging onto the precipice. I pulled him back on the ledge, but brother, it was not safe at all. The ground was unstable, and it was only getting worse with the rain. I had only one choice: wait and hope that Sarahs were already on their way. Luckily, my father Miko is quickly to respond to any call. It didn't take long before I heard the sounds of the Sarahs transports coming our way. I tried to wake up Nick, but he wasn't budging. I knew he had to get help fast. My parents taught me a thing or two about how to save a life with Sarah's procedures, so I did what I could to get Nick ready to be carried up. When they arrived, it wasn't until my father rappelled down that he realized he was rescuing his own son. I remember the look in his eyes. Everything went from shock to disappointment to relief. I knew he was really going to let me have it, but not right then and there. We both knew that Nick had to go up fast, so we worked to pull him up. Then, as luck would have had it, a monstrous Gibraltar-sized roar of rain sent a mudslide down the hill. Nick was pulled up just in time, but my father and I were sent further down the side of the cliff. We crashed another 20 meters down with my father's arm completely crushed under the rock. I still remember the taste of the water and mud that had almost killed us. I had to think quick to save our lives, so I grabbed my father's bubble shield and covered us. Debris kept falling, but that handy shield protected us both just long enough for Sarahs to send another team down to get us. You know what, brother? That was the first time I ever used that bubble shield. But that's not why I remember that night. I put a lot of people in danger. Nick, the whole Sarahs team, myself, and my father, who lost his arm because of me. But he didn't know that. For some reason, Nick took the fall for me. I don't know why he did it. Chalk it up to his gratitude at being sent up first, or the grand stupidity of young love. But when Nick was questioned, he said the whole thing was his idea, that he stole the bike and he was driving it. As my father and I were lifted up into the clouds, Nick gave me a look and said, "Don't worry, it's going to be all right." But I knew even then it wouldn't be. I walked up to my father at the hospital as guilty as the sky is blue. But he didn't yell. He just looked at me, smiled, and said, I know, my son, but breaking the rules is sometimes part of life. As long as there is someone there who has your back, you will survive. You did good out there, Makoa. Remember, you're a Gibraltar. It's in your blood to protect your own. Promise you'll do that." I never told him the truth. I've never really told anyone the truth. Nick's parents wanted him to learn his lesson and had sent him to a juvenile delinquency center. To this day, I don't know what happened there. We lost touch. I tracked him down years later. It was bad, involved with the wrong people, relying on the wrong things to get through the day. That damn place turned a good kid with a heart of gold into a criminal with no hope. And now he had a baby, a little boy. He got the wrong future because I was too scared to tell the truth. That kind of mistake eats you up, brother. How do you make up for that? How do you give back a lifetime? After that, I couldn't leave Solace because Solace needed me. It wasn't long after that my father handed me the bubble shield and told me to get practicing because it was time for me to change a life. And I did. For him, for Pio, and for Nick.